First. Good evening. Welcome to Made to Think with your host, Ninjam. Tonight, I have an absolute spectacular, wonderful guest. All of you listeners out there, you know how long I've had this curiosity. Something it started for me in 1998 with Fingerprints of the Gods. Somebody asked me who built the pyramids. I read that book. I couldn't answer the question. And then I've been climbing a pyramid, trying to find this knowledge my entire life ever since. It's took me from books from Robert Bauval, Robert Schoch, John Anthony West. And then I got to meet Hakim in 2005 on my first trip to Egypt. And it was after I discovered Hakim had passed away, I was Googling him. I found the School of Chematology, which led me to Stephen Melher's books. And when I read The Land of Osiris, I couldn't believe there were all the answers and some of the teachings that Hakim had taught me. And through Stephen, I discovered this wonderful author who basically allowed me to climb the final blocks of that pyramid. And now I feel like I can die a happy man. I've got enough power and enough knowledge to ascend. Without further ado, it's been my most requested, my most anticipated guest, one of the hottest guests on Podcast Universe, the wonderful Christopher Dunn. Thank you so much for joining this podcast. Wonderful. How are you, sir?
I'm very well, thank you. And I appreciate you inviting me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Now, first of all, I have listened to all the podcasts you've been doing recently, and so many people have skipped a little bit of a personal background. So I'd like to start with, we're both from the same place, apparently. Where originally are you from in Manchester?
Higher Blakely.
Right.
Right, up near where Heaton Park, around Heaton Parkway. Yeah.
Okay. And you were lucky to have a childhood that was mostly void of what we call today's social distractions. How did you spend your free time with friends? And you also mentioned that you had a childhood friend, which is the late and great actor, Mr. Bernard Hill. Rest in peace.
Yeah, rest in peace, Bernie. Yeah, he was a part of our. We went to school together and church together. He's a year older than me, so he was kind of peripheral to the core group of friends that I had, but on occasion we would get together and have a chat. And I remember the last time that Bernard Hill and I had a chat, and it was on Victoria Avenue, just near St. Clair's, and Plant Hill Road, which is where Bernie lived. He lived on Plant Hill Road. And so he was telling me about his plans for the future and his interest in acting. And I walked away from him, and I was thinking, the guy will never make it. He's dry as a stick. But but he turned out, he made it, and he made it big. And congratulations to him. He was a great actor. I've enjoyed him in all his stuff.
So how did you guys spend your free time as children, running around the streets, without the internet?
My parents would probably say we spent it in bad company, doing bad things. Probably just like you, Adam, when you're a kid, you get into trouble, right?
Of course.
You're a naughty boy.
Never with the police.
The one thing that never happened though, the police never took me home to my parents. That would have been a disaster. I was always warned that if ever the police brought me home to the front door, there was going to be trouble. So that never happened, but it was close. I was close a couple of times.
So, I mean, everybody's got vehicles now. How would you get to school in the mornings?
Well, at first, in primary school, it was walked. I just walked a couple of blocks. And then when I went to secondary school, well, actually, they had what they call the 11 plus. Do they still have that now in England?
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either. But anyway, back then they had the 11 plus, and that's where they separate you from, one path to another. My path was technical, and I think St. Anthony's was the technical college or technical school at that time, and there was no room because I had to be in a Catholic school. They won't send me to a non-Catholic school, so they had a what they called a grammar stream at St. Columba's in Wythenshawe,
Yeah,
and so
that's what my
I
grandparents are from.
yeah, and so I caught the bus and had to go over to Wythenshawe every school day. You know, it was from Blakely down to downtown Manchester, and run a couple of blocks and catch another bus out to Wythenshawe. It was, yeah, every day.
Was it
And
rough
then,
back? Was it as rough as it used to be back then, or worse, or everybody was nice and friendly?
yeah, you know, a lot of people say that we had it rougher back then. I think in many respects, kids today have it a lot worse than we did when we were kids. I mean, we knew what neighborhoods to stay out of, right? And so we stayed out of them. And uh, because if you walk through there, you'd be in trouble just for being there. Now that those neighborhoods, they come to you through your computer screen, and the whole universe is open to you, so they can reach you even if you want them to or not.
Yeah,
You
well,
gotta apply some serious filters.
I've got a 12-year-old here. He spends most of his time on the laptop, and I actually worry more about what he's doing when I'm not watching than rather him playing out somewhere.
Right.
What school subjects did you like and dislike?
Well, I liked English. That was fine.
Yep.
History was I enjoyed that. Geography. The math teacher was him and I didn't really get along that well, so that wasn't a very strong subject for me. Um, and but it had to be later on throughout my career. But then,
Of course.
yeah, those subjects and music. It was
Now, would you say that education was a lot stricter back then than it is now, taken more serious by students?
from my observations in the States, the kids are put under a lot more pressure to perform scholastically than I was when I was a kid. So I would say that you know, in the last since I've been in the States, and as I have seen parents, you know, I think they call them here helicopter parents. They're always there, always hovering, and it's like they're, they're at every success and every failure of their child in sports. You know, screaming at them from the stands and stuff like that. My parents never came to any games that I was at. There was only one event that my father went to, and that was I was in the semi-final of the Lancashire Boxing Championship, and it was being held at Bellevue, and you've probably heard of Bellevue
Of
Hall,
course.
right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
All right. So anyway, I was there. I was there to get beat up by some semi-finalists, and my father, because his philosophy was that you beat you beat the devil into the child rather than out of the child. He never beat me, but he was happy to go and see somebody else beat me up, and and so that was it. I got in the ring and I got a hammering, and it was a technical knockout in the second round. Um, they couldn't stand all the blood, and I was gushing from the nose. But I did get an award for that fight. That was fun. It
Well,
was for
that was the end of your boxing career.
pretty much.
That's excellent. Just when you mentioned them helicopter parents, it's funny because all them kids that grow up and end up getting a good job, they all end up on MasterChef, wanting to be a cook.
Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's a phenomenon, isn't it? Master Chef. They all the cooking shows. My God, Yeah.
Now, you're an author, a fantastic author, fantastic writer. Can you remember the first book that you ever read that made you curious to read more books? And I mean, have you always been into reading books at a young age?
Yes, I when I left school, I joined a book club and I had delivery of classic novels, and so I dug into all the classics at the time, uh, and I learned a lot that way. Reading. My favorite author was Charles Dickens. I read
Yeah.
Shakespeare, uh, William Makepeace, Thackeray. Somerset Maugham, a lot of the classic authors. And so, yeah, I mean, that was a part of my self-education because, education doesn't end when you leave school.
Are
Yeah,
you
you
are
have to.
you are you, are you critical about your own writing, or are you confident? Because I think you've got a fantastic flow. I think you've got you romanticize things so well. Do you think that's helped from reading so much? Maybe even subliminally.
Well, yeah, that's very complimentary of you, and I appreciate that.
What?
I think the actually reading prose and reading and writing poetry really helps you in your writing because even with poetry you have a particular cadence and readers like to have they engage more with a certain rhythm of writing so that there's not too many roadblocks in it
Yeah.
and 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 when I wrote my last book, I did a survey of people, because I didn't want to put many roadblocks in my book that people had to be jumping around all the time.
Yeah.
Uh,
That's a good
and
point.
so, yeah, one of the questions I had of friends is, do you read footnotes or endnotes when when you have those references included in a work? Do you ever go to the endnotes and the footnotes and uh, the majority said no, they never read them, and so I decided then that if there was anything that was worth saying, it would go in the main text, and if it wasn't worth saying, don't say it. Don't litter your book with endnotes and footnotes. Uh, not all people share that philosophy, and that's up to them. But that was my decision when I started to write my last book. Now my first two books they do have endnotes, but then the Chicago Manual of Style, which is the work that my publisher recommends that we follow, generally they have changed over the years, and in-text citations are so much more convenient and efficient when you are writing a book because every reference is in your bibliography, and then you do an in-text citation pointing to that work and the particular page number, and so that was very useful, I think, and I think people appreciated that. The
That's
uh, the feedback
very
I've
insightful.
got from that is that it's a very user-friendly book. And
Ho-
my publisher, to their credit, uh, you can write a book, but uh, if you don't have somebody who is holding you to task and holding your feet to the fire, and uh, and driving you to put out the best product possible, then you don't have as good a product, in my opinion. I wouldn't anyway, and I give all my credit to the editors at Inner Traditions. Albo Sudacom, she was awesome, and the copy editor uh, was she was a fact checker from hell, I must say. She was
Great, we love those. Bring
she
them back.
she that's
Where,
right, right.
where have
She
they gone? They're on holiday, something, or on vacation, aren't they?
she she fact checked the hell out of my book.
My God,
And
that must have been some task.
yeah, right. And so, yeah, and yeah, there were differences of opinion at some time, at some points, but But I generally I greatly appreciate that input. I mean, it's very important, and it's why it takes so long to get the book out.
So,
But
just jumping back a little bit, you know, what year was you born again?
1946.
Wow. So like, you know, the
What do you
value of
mean, wow?
money.
Hey. What do you mean,
I
wow?
the reason I'm talking to you is because you're a wise man. I learned from the wise men.
Well, it's
um, the value of money obviously was different back then. Just for some listeners, like you know, young listeners, I still don't understand the old currency. But if you could just describe, I don't know what you use. I can't remember shillings or whatever. What would $10 of money buy you in today's money? $10 of today's money buy you back then. Sorry.
well, $10 was more than I made for a 40-hour week when I started work.
Wow, that's crazy.
I made £2.10 for 40
Wow.
hours. Yeah, so it was about in that, you know, that was in the 60s, maybe in that the money then it was about $7 a week that I brought home.
That's
And
insane.
that was for 40 hours. But I was serving an apprenticeship, so apprentices are, you know, they're notoriously underpaid.
Okay. What was the first electrical gadget that caught your attention?
The first electrical gadget, the radio, I guess, would be the first one. That was the first electrical gadget that caught my attention. Yeah, I mean, we'd sit around listening to the radio. That's all we had. We didn't have television when I was a kid.
Yeah,
Uh,
not a bad thing.
and yeah, we would sit around listening to the radio in the evening. That was kind of special. Yeah.
So, you know, when I was 8 years old, I had a simple paperboy job. I know you just before you was an apprentice. Did you have a part-time job when you was at school? You know, were you making money?
Yeah, I had a part-time job at a canning factory, operating a punch press on a Saturday. So yeah, that was a dangerous job, and they didn't know I was 14 at the time. So
Is that
I
illegal then?
think child labor laws would they'd be in trouble now with child labor laws, right? But
So that was
but
that your first introduction to machines in factories?
actually, yeah.
Very
The
interesting.
I mean, at high school, there was metal class and wood class, right? So there was a little bit of that, but not of the industrial type. You
And
know, they had.
you mentioned that you walked to school, but I mean, were bicycles expensive back then, or I'd assume everybody had a bicycle. And the question is, because you're what you got into in the future, were you ever interested in the mechanics of how bicycles worked, or you just rode it like everyone else?
Oh, I just rode it like everybody else, and I didn't ride my bike to school because it was within walking distance, and when I did have a bike, I didn't ride it to secondary school because it was too far away, but I did ride it to work uh, when uh, when I was 15 and starting work in the shop. So there was that. But I was interested in mechanical things. My father had a butcher's shop, and he had a Hobart mixer, and
Right.
so this mixer it mixed the sausage meat, right? So we'd be filling skins of sausage in the basement of the shop, and the Hobart was there, and it broke. It just crapped out on us, and so I pulled it apart,
Oh
and
wow.
found out that there was a little shaft that that held a gear on the inside that had broken. So I took it to work and made another one and put it back together, and everything was fine. So
That's
it worked out.
awesome. That's awesome. Now just I'm a massive movie fan. I study film at university. What's the first film you remember ever watching at the cinema? As I can't imagine it was that popular, was it then? Or
The most noteworthy, I think, probably the first one in the cinema was Seven Brides for Seven Brothers,
okay.
and yeah, I can't even remember the cinema that it was playing at.
Yeah, I just think what was the first Manchester cinema? That's an interesting question. That's probably a club now.
Right, right, right. Yeah, I mean they had a cinema in our neighborhood down Victoria Avenue. Uh, was it the Palace or something? I don't know.
Odeon,
I can't
yeah,
remember.
could have been the
You,
Palace.
you, yeah, you're talking to an old man now, and you're expecting his memory to.
I wanted you to feel the nostalgia. Now you also have a keen interest in theatre. You went to the theatre yesterday with your wife for Mother's Day. Hello
Right.
to all the beautiful mothers. What was the first play that you ever saw live?
Oh, the first play. Um, hmm. That's interesting. My mother, she was involved in a operatic society and Middleton Operatic Society. They did light opera, and I think she was in the what was the show that she was in? White Horse Inn or something like that. Was
Mhm.
the and she'd take me to rehearsal, and I just sit in the back and watch. But yeah, theater. The my theater going in Manchester. Generally, I would go to the theater in downtown Manchester. It wasn't the Palace Theatre. What was the
Could have been
name?
the
It was
Odeon.
the Odeon. Yeah, it was the Opera
Yeah,
House. Yeah,
yeah.
right. And and they would have uh, the D'Oyly Carte Opera Company coming through, and they would be playing Gilbert and Sullivan, right? And so I would, I couldn't afford a seat, so I would buy what they call a standing seat at the back of the circle, right? They
Wow.
call them promenade seats, something like that, for a shilling, and I'd stand at the back and take in the performance. They were great. I loved them. Eventually, I was able to afford a seat.
Now, did you have any like obviously early interest in engines, trains, steam trains, planes, ships, or rockets, things like that?
I've always had I mean, I've known, I had friends who were really into trains, and they had these very expensive train sets that they'd set
Yeah.
up in their attics, right? You know,
Hornbit, yeah, of course.
I was never that, I just wasn't that guy, you know? And I didn't have a car until I was 21, and that was a Hillman Manx shooting brake. It was kind
Crikey.
of like a Barney Rubble car where if you put your foot down, press your foot down too hard on the brake, it would go through the floorboard and hit the road. There was, yeah, it was quite a piece of crap, I would say. They, I only paid, I only paid £20 for it. So, yeah.
But would you get your hands dirty and try to fix the engine yourself or take it to a mechanic?
No, I wouldn't fix it. No.
Okay.
Uh, I mean, for the most part, working in tool and die and machining, you stay a lot cleaner than a car mechanics.
I see.
I mean, it's
My
not that I have not. I have but it wasn't something that I really enjoyed doing. I did it out of necessity. I mean, at one time, you had to change the oil in your own car, right? They didn't have these oil change places, so
I think my
they
point
changed.
is, I think your generation probably knew how to do a few more things than our generation. We've just become so lazy now. Get somebody else to do everything for you. Now, my father used to take me to Manchester Airport when you could get very close to the runway. It was our hobby because my grandma lived just right near the airport in Wythenshawe, and I used to love
Right.
it. I used to absolutely love it. I used to collect models of planes and stuff and build the little models and paint them. Did your father ever take you to such places to stimulate your curiosity with machines of any kind?
Not really. I mean, he was my dad was a butcher, and so he was more interested in cutting meat than metal, and I was more interested in cutting metal than meat. So,
Good line that. So what age did you realize that you had an interest in becoming a craftsman or an engineer?
I kind of fell into that because I applied at a company, Mather and Platts, in Manchester, and it was the Newton Heath Miles platting plant, and I expressed that I wanted to be an electrical engineer, and so they gave me a test, and then I was told that there were no openings for electrical engineers, but they had openings in the apprenticeship training school. And so they gave me a job as an apprentice, and I worked. That involved learning, the workshop practices, processes, all the various operations of different machines, even to the point of doing foundry work and forging and foundry work and stuff like that. But mostly it was the machining and also handwork. So it wasn't just making things by machines, but also making things by hand. And some of those tasks included filing and polishing surfaces to within 1,000ths of an inch or something like that, creating a solid square, creating V blocks, lapping plates, and things of that nature. A lot of hours just spent bent over a vise filing parts to particular requirements or shapes, geometries. So yeah, it was and I liked it. I really liked it, and I would make things that they had us make things, personal items that we could use, and I would take them home. My dad was really, really pleased that I was actually learning a trade, because he'd always insisted that having a trade was important
Yeah,
for continued employment throughout your life.
100%. Was it considered a high profile career choice at the time with good future prospects if you worked hard at it?
Um, I don't know. I didn't look at it that way. I didn't look at it as, hey, I'm going to set myself on a career path now that is going to take me around the world, and that didn't even enter my mind. It was just a job, and I wanted to work, and I wanted to learn, and so that offered me the opportunity to do both, but work with my hands at the same time.
That's good. Yeah, I actually wish I'd have done the same thing. Working with your hands is it's a dying
Right.
art. What were your main goals at this early stage in your career then? What was you wanting to achieve?
Well, my main goal was payday and going to the pub in the evening.
Yes, I knew you were going to say that. So you'd spend all your money on booze.
Not all of it. I didn't get
Now,
all of it. The
some
tradition back then, I don't know what it was like for you, Adam, but the tradition for me, it was my first paycheck went to the church,
oh
and
wow.
then every paycheck thereafter went to my mom, and then she would give me my allowance. So
Wow.
yeah.
That's that's interesting. Now, big fan of Nikola Tesla. We'll get into your new book in a sec. Now I know I've studied a lot of Tesla, and Tesla got in trouble at school for seemingly having more knowledge than his teacher about how to improve the design of a simple dynamo. And he presented a logical theory into how to make it more cost effective and efficient. Was there any such moment in your early career when you found a solution to an age old problem before any of your peers, or when you simply stood out above the rest of them in the warehouse for having a moment of genius?
Uh, very short answer to that one. No.
It would come much later.
Oh, you won't pick me. You want to pick me out of a crowd, Adam. I'll tell you.
Okay, that's interesting. Now, another thing is my uncle from Manchester, he used to work for British Aerospace in the wind tunnels. He worked on the aerodynamics. So he used to always have those giant wooden models in his garage, which I play with as a child. How did you eventually move into aerospace manufacturing, and what was your role?
Yeah, well, I was working at a company in Manchester. It was called Hunter Musgrave, and it was 1968. A ad appeared in the Manchester Evening News for an American company was recruiting machinists, and it was an aerospace manufacturing company. And I've always been like you. I've always been fascinated with aerospace, engines. Uh, Ringway Airport, as it used to be known, and
Yeah, that's right.
watching the planes
Ringway
land.
Airport. God, I forgot that name. It's
Right,
just give.
right. So yeah, and so yeah, I've always been. The reason I was always fascinated with aerospace and gas turbine engines is the complication of geometry in them. It seems like, I look at some of the shapes of parts that go into these engines, and it's like, I think, well, the designer who designed this must be on drugs because it's like all these weird aerofoil shapes, and they've become even more sophisticated over the years. And so it was exciting. I was, I was hired to work in Martinsville, Indiana, uh, and my job there was to operate a Bullard vertical turret lathe, and that was because I got that job because in Mather and Platts I was operating a Webster and Bennett vertical boring mill. They call them vertical boring mills in the in England. Oh, they did. I don't know what they call them now. Uh, but in the States they call them vertical turret lathes. So anyway, that was the job that I had, machining aircraft parts on the night shift in Martinsville, Indiana.
That's amazing. So you moved to the States in 1969, right? Which
Right.
happened, that's around the same time as the moon landings. My father was in the Navy, he was in the submarines. He told me from day one that the moon landings were fake. So I have to ask you, in your opinion, real or fake?
Okay, so my personal knowledge of that, the company that I went to work for, Twig Industries, they made the framework for the survival backpacks for the astronauts.
Yeah.
Okay, so they would, I think they made them out of titanium or some exotic metal anyway, something light, but certainly not cheap. And so that's one one indication to me that if this was a prop, if it was a prop and everything was staged, hell, they could have made the frame out of wood, not titanium, right? And then the specifications for welding these items were very, very strict. So, and another interesting snippet is that I watched the moon landing in the living room of the welding foreman who had actually supervised the welding of those astronaut survival pack frames, and that was exciting. That was shortly after I arrived. I arrived on May the 9th, 1969.
So you're saying real?
Yeah, I'm saying real. Yeah.
Just because I found just before your interview with Joe Rogan, there was that Bert Sibrel, who's just adamant that they were fake. And I understand what you just said then, but I believe they probably built those props for going to the moon, but then decided not to do it in case something had gone wrong. So that your argument does make sense. still doesn't mean they actually went. But who knows? Who knows? All speculation. Now, how was life different in the USA compared to sunny Manchester?
Sunny.
Uh, good answer. Okay, sunny, but what my point is, did you see any big difference in advanced technology and tools being used in the USA at that time compared to back home in Manchester?
No, not really. I mean, methods and tools such as, the instruments that you use to measure parts were the same. Verniers. The one instrument that I became familiar with, I was not familiar with in England, and that was what they call a pie tape, and it was it was like a tape that was had these vernier measurements to them, but it measured the circumference, but it converted it in the measurements to diameter, right? By dividing the whatever that measure was circumferentially by pi, 3.1415926 forever.
And are you using what? I mean, are you using any kind of computers back then, or is it everything just measured out with tools?
No, there were no computers back then. Not for the common man, not for, in the shop. I mean, even in the 80s, you wouldn't see computers in the hands of machinists and tool makers, or even maybe even the 90s. When I had I got my first computer in 1983, and it was a it was a Commodore 64, and it was like the cheapest. It had just dropped in price to below $400, and I bought it at Children's Palace in Indianapolis. But this computer, by the time all the attachments, but they had a floppy drive and a TV screen, printer, and all that. It was $1,500 at the time. But yeah, that and then introducing computers into the engineering departments. In 1986, I came to work at Danville Metal Stamping, and all the engineers were still working on the boards, the drafting boards with drafting machines. There were no computers. And that changed over the years, and now everything is done, on the computer.
So you was learning the systems for computer as they were coming out. That was part of your job.
It wasn't so much a part of my job. I made it a part of my job,
Right.
and because a lot of people, were still doing things the old way, and the old way was really a new way, which was instead of hand calculating, some math problem, they were using TI calculators or something like that to make calculation.
Right.
And yeah, so all of trigonometry, you had a trig book and a calculator, and basically that's how you plotted curves and measure other measurements.
So the computer systems basically made it easier for everybody, or were they making more issues and mistakes?
That's an interesting thing. I remember when I got my first calculator, and and I would put the equation in and get the results, and then I would check the calculator by hand and calculating it myself because I didn't trust it.
That's funny.
Yeah, right. And so it's like, oh, I don't trust this. I got to check it myself. Oh, it's right. So enough times of that, I realized I was wasting my time. So I just, trusted the calculator after that. But
So when did you start working with lasers, and why were they so important?
mm, uh, well, the lasers, I was looking at, this was when I was doing research on the Great Pyramid, and trying to figure out what technology was being employed within the Great Pyramid, because
So I see, I see.
I'd already reached the conclusion that uh, it was a machine just by, the way its precision, its features. It looks like a machine, has the precision of a machine, and studying the conventional literature and theories about the Great Pyramid, they didn't seem to add up to me, and so I figured there was a question that needed to be answered there.
Right, yeah. So I thought you'd use machines in your career in the warehouses. So let me just back up a sec. So in 1977, you came across Peter Tompkins' book, which spurred your interest to go down this rabbit hole with the pyramids. What you're saying there is you used the lasers when you were measuring inside. I'm sorry, made a mistake. But what made you stumble over
No,
Peter?
no, you didn't make a mistake.
Ah,
I mean,
okay.
the lasers became a big part of my life, and the introduction to them, or even the initial impetus to study them,
Ah,
uh, came through my studies of the Great Pyramid, because
ah,
I was trying to find out. I was looking at the Grand Gallery in the Great Pyramid and thinking, what was housed here? Something was in this space. What was it? And
I
I got
see.
it into my head because I'm pretty nerdy. I was fascinated with lasers. Read all I could about them, and uh, and I was talking to my coworkers about it. I even talked to my boss about it at the time, who I said, "You need to get into lasers," because he had uh, a machine that was being built, and the ways on the machine, the rails that the carriages run on, was being aligned using piano wire. And they would string piano wire from one end to the other, level them out on both ends, and then check in between in order to adjust the rail.
Oh my
Uh,
God.
I know, right? So
That can't be accurate.
it was it was close enough for what they were doing, I guess.
Ah,
But the I thought that, well, lasers would be more efficient, in terms of being able to set them up and make an alignment that way. So that led to my boss, who was Max Reddick of Reddick Engineering in Indianapolis. He um, he had been to an auction at Allison Engine Company, which is now owned by Rolls-Royce. But they had auctioned off a Perking-Elmer laser alignment retroreflector measuring system. Uh, and so he wheels this cart into the shop and up to me, and he goes, "Here, bloke, figure this out. See what you can do."
that's funny.
So he always called me bloke, right? Hey, I say, bloke, figure this one out.
So
So
yeah,
anyway,
the Peter Tompkins book. How did you stumble across that? I mean, that's the first book, right? Which was a really big book in the day. It was the pioneer, I guess. How did you how did you stumble across that?
yeah, that was in a bookstore in Canby, Indiana, and it was the Keller's Metaphysical Bookstore,
Oh yeah.
and yeah, Paul and Ardith Keller were the proprietors of it, and they also held philosophy classes and meditation in their home, and so it was a period of intense learning, actually learning a lot of things, different religions around the world. I had become agnostic, almost atheistic in my philosophy, and so it was very enlightening to find a group of people who were, intent on examining the mysteries of the universe. And so there was a lot of books that I had purchased through that, and then there was this one. It was Peter Tompkins' book sitting on the shelf, and it just jumped out to me. It was like, wow, very attractive book, very expensive at the time. It was $20 at the time. That was 1977,
Wow.
and yeah. So anyway, I bought it, took it home, and then settled down to read it, and it just blew me away. Um,
What was the
you know,
trigger in that? There was one part of it that triggered you, that really caught your attention.
yeah, the I think having a more detailed understanding of the internal architecture of the Great Pyramid was very important to learn about the early explorers who had been through the Great Pyramid and the different parts of the Great Pyramid that had been discovered by them. Uh, for instance, Howard Vyse, who, blasted
Yeah,
above the King's Chamber and found all these so-called relieving chambers. Just a lot of, different good references that I could access to learn more. One of them being Sir William Flinders Petrie and his book Pyramids and Temples of Giza. So
very important.
that was very important to me. Yeah.
Well, there
Mo-
was
all-
there
all-
was there was one question in Peter's book that really caught your attention. I just listened to the Voyage podcast yesterday, and you mentioned it in that. I can't recall, but you said there was one answer in the book that you really wanted to find out, and that's what started your curiosity off.
yeah, it was right at the beginning of the book that he asked the question, uh, did the Great Pyramid um, enshrine a lost science
That's
from
it.
a
Yes.
previous civilization, And
I mean,
so that question,
77, that's a big question, right?
I mean, yeah, did the Great Pyramid enshrine a lost science?
Wow.
And then that kind of set the tone for the book because he was introducing different explorers and people who traveled to Egypt and studied the Great Pyramid and actually started to try and figure out what it was actually used for. And central to that, then, of course, is the overall question, or actually, yeah, was the Great Pyramid really a tomb? And everybody's saying no, it had to have been something else. And we need to figure what that something else is.
But just
And
just just then, nobody was questioning that, right? It was just the normal mainstream.
I think what you have is a mixture.
Right.
You have people who uh, hold hold the tomb theory very dearly, and to
Yeah.
their hearts they believe it, and they won't hear anything else. And then you have somebody who is kind of on the fence. You are taught something in school, and then somebody raises a question about it and offers a different idea. The idea is so outrageous and so wild and crazy and futuristic that it can't
Yeah.
possibly be true, right? So I come along with my wild and crazy idea, and I get a mixture of responses to it.
Fascinating.
Outright.
That must have been a wonderful feeling. I mean, did you ever wonder why you may have been the only one with such a bizarre theory, or did it always seem logical based on your previous engineering and manufacturing experience? Do you think that's what gave you the edge?
I think if I had an edge, it definitely would have been the manufacturing experience and a history of building machines and actually understanding or trying to understand and absorb what blueprints are telling me. And so it's kind of like when you are building machines and tools and things of that nature. uh, and you are working with drawings, two-dimensional drawings. Generally, they're presented to you in three views, right? Side, top, and the front. And then there may be some breakout perspectives of different features that are on a different angle. But generally, you're looking at three views of a two-dimensional views of a three-dimensional object. And so essentially, as you work a lot with them, you develop the ability to uh, model that in your brain as a
Wow,
three-dimensional object,
that's
right?
very cool.
And so it's kind of like, and there are some guys who can, some engineers that I've worked with that were not only very good at that, but they were also very good at sketching the three-dimensional object,
Yes.
and in order to instruct workers, like be they sheet metal workers, or welders, machinists, or skilled and semi-skilled workers on the shop floor. He would present them with a three-dimensional sketch of the object that they're making.
That's a very cool insight. Now, I don't want to miss any important people. You've always claimed to be a pointer as such, leading the future to take a deeper dive into the ancient anomalies. So aside from Peter, aside from Howard Weiss and Petrie, is there anyone else that you would like to give credit to for their painstaking research before all this became so mainstream?
Well, yeah, there's so many of them. Um, I
I mean,
mean,
just who did the diagram that you ended up carrying around in your back pocket the whole time? Who it was in Peter's book, was it? But who sketched that out? How did they do that so early on?
I did it.
You did that.
My first my first sketches were, on the kitchen table, and basically, isometric views of the pyramid. I had all the perspective and everything like that. So,
I mean,
and
where did that first two D model of the inside of the pyramid come from? How did we get
oh,
that?
it would have come from Peter,
From
from Tompkins' book, yeah.
and that
Tompkins
came from
Tompkins
Petrie.
principally, yeah. And yeah, I mean his drawings came from different sources, but I took most of it from Tompkins' book.
I mean, they didn't have scanners like we do now. So how would they have done that? Just
Oh.
with piano wire?
Well, Petrie, he was a surveyor, and so he took the instrument of his day into the pyramid to take measurements, and I think they involved chains, chain lengths and
Wow,
stuff like that, right?
that's insane.
And, yeah, and so it's kind of like, early on they were using the instruments that were available to them at that time, just like, when I first went to Egypt in 1986, I didn't take any instruments with me at all. But then
You wish you did.
I wished I did, and I
Damn
made
it.
a note that the next time I go, I'm going to at least have a straight edge and a precision square with me. So
Now
I was,
that leads me perfectly into the next question. Like, you visited Egypt for the first time, 1986, after reading Peter's book. What kind of impact did that have on you? And I think not having your tools might have been a better time for you to observe rather than be playing around. So, how did you feel? What was your first reaction to Egypt?
um, yeah, that was kind of weird in a way, because there was already people who get into pyramid research. They uh, they have an emotional investment in it, right? And so
Here, here,
that's
here.
why that's why many of them are so protective of their ideas, and everybody deserves respect for all the work that they do. an
100%.
interesting show. But the for me, when I first went there, I was kind of concerned or a little worried that what I had read would turn out, the reality would be somehow different to what I had read and what I had built in my mind in 3D. So I I went to Giza. We stayed at the Oasis Hotel down at the down on the Alexandra Road, and I circled around the Great Pyramid for about 3 days. I was
Yeah.
like,
It's so good,
I
right?
can't go in.
It's
I
mad.
can't,
I know.
can't go in.
Yeah, I was
No,
like
not
that.
today. Not today.
Can't
No,
go in. I love it.
all my dreams are going to be shattered if I go in there right now.
Yeah.
Uh, But the eventually, I think on the third day, I I was with my fiance at the time, and on the third day, I said she was going to stay around the pool. I said, "Well, I'm going to go to the Giza Plateau and go inside the Great Pyramid." So that day, I went in, and it was mind blowing, just absolutely mind blowing.
Yeah.
And the thing, it's like, I think I don't know whether it was a good thing that I had not been in the Great Pyramid or visited Egypt before I started my research, because my research was pretty mechanical and cold, right? It was like uh, trying to figure out the mechanics of something through drawings and not actually be inside the machine that you're studying.
Yeah.
uh, and so it was like, yeah, the experience of being there changes you a great deal. Yeah. And I don't know anybody who has been to Egypt who has not been somehow affected by the experience.
Well, I was the same. I picked up Graham Hancock's book 1998, and then I read the Orion Mystery, and then I went in 2005, stayed at the Mina House, and just before I left to go to Luxor after 3 days in Giza, I met Robert Baval around the pool with his wife, and that was the day after I met Hakeem, and I got to talk to Robert. We stayed in contact for years,
Yeah.
and he was asking me where's this Hakeem? I've heard legends about him. I had no idea. I just randomly went to Hakeem's after going in a perfume shop, and the guy
Oh,
in the
really?
perfume, yeah, I went in and I was with my 14-year-old niece. It was a birthday gift, this trip, and he made a joke saying, "If you put this perfume on your fiance's pyramid, it will make her extremely horny." And I said, "Hey, she's 14," and he was very apologetic. So he's like, "Hey, if you want to
Yeah,
climb
well,
the pyramid."
that sounds like him. Yeah.
He asked me, actually, what happened was, I don't know if you can see this. I have a tattoo on my arm, which is the Duat, which I got from
Yeah.
Robert Baval's book. And the guy in the perfume shop told me that that meant double harmony. And he invited me to go to meet Hakeem. And that's where I got the first chematology teachings, right by the Sphinx. It was just a very random, very incredible experience. Changed my life. Absolutely changed my life. So, now, you have written dozens of articles in the past, aside from three groundbreaking books. But probably my favorite books, to be honest, Chris. They've resonated with me so much. They've gave me so much like powerful confidence that I have chosen this path for the right reason. And I can't say thank you enough. I could have lost myself somewhere in, I was a DJ, I was in the clubs. I stopped doing all that and I got really heavy into reading. And yeah, I feel confident that it was all for a meaning. But anyway, you wrote a lot of very well-known publications in the past. The standout one was for the analog fact magazine, which was called Advanced Machining in Ancient Egypt, which has been heavily quoted ever since. I think that
Right.
was that 19, what year was that?
1984, August
19,
1984. Yeah.
okay, 84. So this went viral. And how did that change the course of your life before you became an author?
Yeah, that was I'd actually had a manuscript kind of roughed in. I thought I had a book manuscript, and I was trying to find a publisher for it. And so a friend of mine, Dr. Arlen Andrews, who is a mechanical engineer, he worked at Bell Labs in Indianapolis, and that was where he was working when I met him. But he's still friends even to this day. Wonderful guy. But he said, well, you know, the best way to publication is public. Generally, publishers like a an author to have some previous publishing experience, right? So, and he recommended that I take the most something that was kind of complete in the book that I was writing, the Giza Power Plant, and submit it as an article. And he recommended submitting it to Analog Magazine because he had had articles published in that magazine. He's had quite a few.
Can I just ask what kind of readers were buying that Analog? Just professional people?
Science fiction and enthusiasts, and
fantastic.
And science. I mean, you know, when you consider the evolution of technology and and where the ideas are dreamed up, you know, you generally you have somebody who's a futurist, and they're looking into the future.
Arthur C. Clarke, right? He's got to be one of them.
Yes, exactly right. And basically, you know, saying, based on what we know today about science, physics, and engineering, technology, and stuff like that, what can we imagine will exist in the future? And so that's where you come, you know, you have Buck Rogers with a cell phone, right? Which I could, yeah, I mean, you're talking about these futuristic technologies that appeared in science fiction stories in the past that are now reality today. Amazing. Oh, you're breaking up. I can't. No, I can't. I can't. Oh. No.
Okay, yes, and we're back. Sorry about that, Chris. Seems like the Wi-Fi is something. Yes, we were talking about the article, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, how did that change your life? You got published. Was that a wide audience?
I think the circulation at that time of the magazine was about 500,000, but of course it was all print, and and so, you know, it went out. There was some letters to the editor that most notably one from L. Sprague de Camp, who was the writer of the Conan and the Barbarian series, but he jumped on me and took me to task, saying that, you know, the methods of the pyramid builders were well known, you know, using copper chisels and stone hammers and stuff like that. So, and then, you know, another one was fairly insulting, but then, you know, I responded to both, and then it kind of died down. Nothing after that. And then 1991, the article was selected to appear in an anthology. It was entitled Analog Essays on Science. And so it was selected as one of the best fact article in the magazine in 1984. So that was nice. And
also, best in the decade, was it? One of the best articles of the decade?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, yeah. It had received the best of the year, but I think that was in a survey of analog readers. Not the best, but one of the best. Maybe second. It came in second.
So
But
then it took you basically 20 years to research and publish your first ever book, which was the Giza Power Plant, Technologies of Ancient Egypt, which was published in 1998. Did you ever think that you were going crazy during that process, or did you nearly give up at any point, or have you always known that you were onto something big?
um, I've always had faith that I was on the right track. I thought I was on the right track. Um, and of course, actually having sufficient information to uh, make a solid argument. There were some things that I didn't know at the time. I thought that I had enough to write a book, but looking back, I really didn't. And so it was, so it was kind of like it was probably a good thing that I had that time period because when you're younger, you're very enthusiastic and eager, and you want to push things out, and it may not be time to push
That's
things out.
so very true. Yeah.
And it wasn't. And so, it was kind of like I had to wait until the 90s when Gantenbrink sent his robot up the southern shaft and revealed more information. Uh, but even so, I was still submitting articles for publication, and one of the magazines was Atlantis Rising. Another one was Quest magazine in England, and they published a few of my articles. Uh, and what that led to was Barbara Hanclau, who was friendly with the editor of Atlantis Rising magazine, Douglas Kenyon, was asking him what was new, and he had indicated that I had a Buck manuscript. He thought I had a Buck manuscript, so she contacted me and said she was interested in looking at my manuscript. So I happily sent it to her, and she was the publisher of Bear and Company, who were in Santa Fe, New Mexico at the time. And so I sent it to her, and she got back to me, and she had done a macro edit of the whole thing, and basically, it was it was a scolding. I felt like I was being scolded. That I had to get my act together and and really get it polished up and in better shape, which I did, and sent it to her, and then it was accepted for publication.
Man,
So,
I can't imagine that process.
well, yeah, it's not a process that a lot of people go through these days. It's kind of like, you know, you today I could publish any old crap that I wanted to, right? Without running it by any editor or any critic or anything like that. I could just put it out there. And maybe I do in some posts that I put out, but when it comes to putting a book out, you can do you can go to a vanity publisher or you can self-publish. But I am very grateful that I have a very a good print publisher who has a great editorial staff, great people, and they've
So,
kept my book print for 25 years.
you've never claimed to be like, the person that's gathered all the answers. You've obviously always give credit to the people that you've learned from, but I think your skill set is
Yeah.
the one thing that nobody else could do in the way you put everything together. So what was your first theory on the pyramids and how they functioned at the time of Giza, the first book?
Uh, that I had seen it as a coupled oscillator, or that it was connected to the Earth. It was vibrating in sympathy with the Earth, and those vibrations were converted to electromagnetic energy. And the processes that allow that to happen were the various features within the Great Pyramid, you would call them subsystems, right? So you go from the subterranean chamber, which imparted the pulse to cause the vibrations in the earth to resonate. Then you go to the Queen's chamber, which I identified as a chemical processing chamber that created hydrogen, and then through the Grand Gallery and up into the King's chamber. But even in the while my new book is has a lot more to it right now, and the introduction of Friedman and Freund's work on earthquake lights is very significant.
Yeah. I will let me get to that because there's a couple more questions. I don't want to jump to the gun. I just want to say something that when I met Robert Bauval, my original theory of the shafts was that the King's body went up the Grand Chamber, the sockets where the resonators were the cogs for the boat. And that's what my tattoo is. The duat is where the soul of the king would go from the King's chamber through the North Shaft to Al Niktak, the middle star of Orion's belt. So when I read your book, I was like, shit, I've got a tattoo that doesn't mean anything. It's like an ex-girlfriend now. So I managed to change my mind. And I'm
you want
not
me to laser, you want me to laser that off you?
No, because it still means duality or double harmony,
Yeah,
which is what I learned from Hakeem. And when you
yeah.
mention coupled oscillator in simple terms, that's like the sun and the moon working together in harmony, right? So it does make sense. Now, what kind of reaction did you get from your colleagues and friends? Because if you're like me, I've never been able to shut up and I just annoy the crap out of everybody, or that everyone just think I've lost the plot. They still think I've lost the plot, but now more people are switching on, and they were the same people that asked me to get you on this podcast. So swivel.
Yeah, right. So yeah, it's same thing. Yeah. I'm just an eccentric dude who has strange ideas about rocks.
Now that book, first book, Giza, can't recommend it enough for everybody. You can buy it on Amazon. Absolutely blew my mind. How did it fare with some of the other folk with slightly different perspectives?
Well, that's the thing. It's kind of like how did I describe it? It's like you have a new invention, right? And you're sitting in the patent office, the patent examiner's office, and so you're applying for a patent for your new invention. And so you're sitting in the waiting room, and you have a pyramid on your lap, and everybody else in the room has their own pyramid on their lap.
That's funny.
That's how it is. It's kind of like you're entering a space where um, everybody has an emotional investment on whatever idea that they've come up with about the Great Pyramid. It doesn't matter what it is. It's like, you know, and I've had situations where there have been these pyramid theorists and they want to take me on and debate things and stuff like that. And I've always been of the philosophy that, if you have uh, a different point of view, uh, publish it. Publish it. Won't get any grief from me. I'm not gonna openly criticize you or assert that my theory is superior to yours. Um, Everybody's free to get to convince somebody that their ideas are correct, and also, to say that to the letter everything that I've written is correct, that would be wrong too. So, I think it's like for me, it's been a conversation that has gone on for now over 25 years, and it's a more of a brainstorming. reverse engineering project. It's kind of like more heuristic in its approach than kind of rigid development of ideas where you have to go from A to B to C to D to arrive at a conclusion. This is like you're grabbing stuff from everywhere, and everything is feeding into the project. All ideas are welcome. And yeah, but to your basic question, the response of most people that were operating in this space at the time has been pretty much silence on the Giza power plant.
Interesting.
Yeah, and there weren't that many back then. I mean, you're talking about the majors like Hancock, Baval, West, Shock. Um, that was about it, I think, back then. But yeah, silence on them.
Well,
And
Hancock's had a lifetime of critique as well. For
yeah,
me, I just want to point out, I always look at everything from both sides, but it's the way people communicate. It seems like the believers are very like open-minded, they'll listen attentively, always up for logical debate, but the other side, very ferocious. It's like they'll bite your
mm,
head off. And that I don't know if they're trying to protect something. And like you say, a lot of people have done a lot of work, academia, a lot of books have been written, and it could be quite embarrassing. But I think if you've written a book in the past, just say, okay, I was part of the journey. Let's now all move forward and find out what's really going on together.
right.
Now, do you enjoy all the attention? Or would you say it was mostly worth being in the spotlight, facing all the positive and the negative?
Oh, well, you do ask awkward questions, don't you? I would say that, yeah, I've made some great friends,
Yeah,
and I've met some great people who have helped me. So I cannot dismiss that part of it. Um, I am I'm not I I am uncomfortable. If the spotlight is on me too much. And there is obviously there's a lot of criticism that is directed my way. Um, and but I would say uh, I'm really honored. I'm blessed. Who wouldn't say that they're honored and blessed to start out at the age of 15 in a machine shop in Manchester, and then be talking about the 3 books that they've written 50 odd years later.
I think it's
So
fascinating. Absolutely.
it's kind of
And
like,
I loved every single word you mentioned about the footnotes. No, but I've read your books 3 or 4 times. Just because I didn't quite get it at the beginning, I thought this is not a book I can skip through. And honestly, you've changed my life. And now the people that I'm talking to, especially like Vietnam or even back home, they just adore you. I think they more and more people are opening up to the hard work that you've done, and we really appreciate it, Chris. So you should be nothing but proud. Um, did you
thanks.
did you welcome? um, I just there's
I'll buy
nobody
you a
else.
beer later.
Oh, there's nobody else I would rather interview right now on this planet. That's how much you mean to me. So, um, did you forget or leave anything really important out of that first book at the time of the publication, which then motivated you to do the recent follow up?
Uh, no,
You
because
yeah.
a lot of the updates in my current book came after the first book was published. So, of course, there was a lot of conversation, online conversation, where during that period of time where my first book was published, and I began to realize that there was one aspect of my work that seemed to be um, people seem to be hung up on, and that is the machining aspects and the precision of the artifacts and the and you know the questioning of the conventional theory that all of these were made using the tools that were found in the archaeological record. And so, that actually led me to gather more information on the mechanical machining, precision, and things of that nature. And so the time between the publication of the first book in 2010, I was pretty much doing research on the manufacturing aspects of the ancient Egyptians.
And that brings us now to your second book. I mean, your books, they're really addictive. You don't want them to end. It's like, no, it's finished. No, I need more. And then I found out, because I read your book quite late, and that you had another book, The Technologies of Ancient Egypt, which came out in 2000. Sorry, The Lost Technologies of Ancient Egypt came out in 2010. And for me, that really opened up completely new field of research. And it added a few new smoking guns, especially with the precision of the statues. And this is where your expertise really can be highlighted and appreciated. So what was the reaction of the naysayers this time? Because for me, you smashed that. You nailed it.
Well, the naysayers will always be naysayers. And they seem to be increasing in number of late, but that's because there has been a lot of misinformation put out and outright character assassination from people who call me a liar or say that I incorrectly measured something. When
we know that's not true.
Yeah, right. It's like,
there's no way you would make that mistake.
I have worked for, I've worked for what, 28 years, crafting parts that went to customers. And, if I was faking measurements, I wouldn't have had a job for that number of years.
There'd be planes dropping out of the sky.
Yes. This is how serious it is, right?
Yeah, it's like, serious.
And then you've got these YouTubers who will rush out a cheap video and just trash everything that I've done without any fundamental knowledge of the bases. I've had one guy who he wanted answers on a particular subject, and it was something I'd already written in my book in Lost Technologies, and I directed him to my book because that's where my that's where I answer all those questions. Anyway, so then he claimed that he didn't understand it, and I was like, well, I can't help that. I can't help. I wrote it and for so that a high schooler would understand it. Somebody who was paying attention in geometry class would understand it. And so if you don't understand it, there's not much I can do about that.
That's something I love personally about your style. It's not too technical. It can be technical. You can look a bit deeper into it, but it's easy to understand and motivating. Very, very skillful that, Chris, to do that, to be honest.
Well, actually, I received a little criticism from a machinist who thought that I was going on too much about the statues. I cover them in 3 chapters, and he was like, I got it in 1 chapter. You didn't have to keep going on about it. But I was like, okay, well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Just for the listeners. Go on. Sorry, go on.
But no, fundamentally though, I think, and this is where the internet becomes a source of misinformation. Most people don't read books, and they will see a meme or they will hear something about something, and then they will take that as gospel and go with it. And so there was a meme put out of me inside the granite box of the Serapeum, and plastered on the the photographs, which are my copyrighted photograph, is fudging and faking measurements, right?
Wow.
And it's like, so now people have seen that and they are now saying, well, Dunn lied, or he cheated, or he faked measurements. And you see that all over the place. And it's even invaded the whole discussion of these vases, right? And so, you know, an unscrupulous person uh, can assassinate your character with one meme, uh, with no truth. And those who see that meme would not even dream of digging into your book to find out the truth. So they just go with it.
So funny. I woke up this morning and my good friend, Australian, he said, "Oh, I posted the picture of the podcast," and he says, "Oh, I've just listened to the Joe Rogan show. This is going to be another pyramid idiot convention. Something about Mark Twain, uncovering. I can't remember the quote, but I just replied very calmly. I said, I suggest you read his 3 books before you make any comment." And I can't imagine anybody greater to come on my show. And he reacted in a way, "Oh well, actually, I put him in his fucking place, Chris." And this is exactly the problem. These people, if you're going to comment on somebody's work, you have to read. I've made sure before I contacted you that I've read enough books. I've felt like the Joe Rogan thing skipped quite a lot of stuff that I was like, "Oh, I want to know what he's going to say about this." So that's why I want to do justice to you right now. So please, people, read the books first. Just for the listeners quickly, what was so important about the lost technologies of ancient Egypt was that you showed me how these statues, the faces were so precise, and that's, in your professional opinion, it's impossible to do that with hand chiseling, and that really opened my eyes. Now when I look at any statue, I see that the precision on both sides. Now, what's the most mystical place or places that are the hardest to fathom, aside from the Great Pyramid, in terms of engineering achievements in the whole of Egypt, based off what you've seen?
Hmm. Of course, I haven't been to every side in Egypt, and I was very, very surprised going to the temples and finding the statues, and then kind of locking on to their geometric perfection. I would say, though there's no such thing as anything that's perfect, but in manufacturing we use perfect a lot. But the geometries of the statues, I think, are very challenging, and they still have not been fully analyzed, because, as I say in my book, that these are just two-dimensional photographs, and just looking at comparative symmetry, and so you're measuring comparisons from one side to the next, and that's it. So there are no hard measurements in terms of size, and as far as the exact tolerances that they were crafted to, that is not, that could be implied on some of the statues, but it's not fully explored. And the only thing that will fully explore that would be a state-of-the-art scanning system that would create a point cloud, and then a professional analysis of the point cloud, and what it reveals as far as symmetry from left to right. That's the only way that we're going to find a good answer. But on that note, I would like to back up a little bit.
Yep.
And explain the lost technologies of ancient Egypt, and what my intention was in writing it, or what it became. It became my focus and desire to engage with the Egyptians and
Yes.
Egyptian to have them do their own measurements of the monuments and the artifacts that I was talking about. And so that was basically it. And I kind of looked at it as, the Giza power plant was the thick end of the wedge, right, when it comes to opening up people's minds. And I thought that the lost technologies would be the thin end of the wedge. And so, it's a working process, and other people are working on it now. The cat's out of the bag, I'm afraid. And so the Egyptians are now looking at these artifacts, and particularly the vases. The research into the precision of the vases is now in the hands of the Egyptians. They have vases in their museums that have provenance and provenience, so they know that they are authentic. There's no question about that, even though I don't question the authenticity of Adam Young's or Matt Bell's vases that were measured. Uh, yeah, and so in response to that work, a lot of people are just freaking out and just throwing crap in the game, trying to
It seems
throw
to
it off.
be the common thing. Yeah, the more evidence comes out, the more crap that gets circulated to keep it,
Well,
out of the main.
yeah, I mean,
Funny, isn't it?
it definitely exposes people's I don't know, uh, intelligence level or critical thinking skills, because they come up with some of the most bizarre arguments to dismiss what they see. It's funny. It's really amazing.
Yeah. So basically, the lost technologies, you took your toolkit there and did some proper research based on your knowledge, and now that's got into the hands of the Egyptians. And just like me, they love you, and I think they believe in you. Still got to get the Westerners involved a little bit more. Now, do you think that the structures in Egypt could have functioned as a main power source that connected to other ancient sites around the world? You think that's possible?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I the Earth, everything is connected.
100%.
Everywhere, things are connected. So, you do have what they call ley lines. You have, you have these power places that have been identified around the world that are energetic hotspots. Um, so, and everything's connected. I mean, you have a sphere, and you stick something on one side and something on another side, and to say that they're not connected would be incorrect.
I'm
It's
just
just
reading. I'm just reading the Ibrahim Karim's book, Biogeometry, which I found really, really well. It goes with your stuff very well because he goes more into like town planning and using this horizontal and vertical spectrum of something. It's very, very well laid out. And yeah, I think this is the kind of stuff we need to see more of, more professionals getting involved, adding their input. Now, congratulations on your new book, Giza,
Thanks.
the Tesla connection. I could not wait for that. I live in Vietnam. Impossible to get it here. I've had it on a waiting list in England for so long. Finally got my hands on a copy. I smashed through it so fast. I'm sorry, but it was just, I will read it again. Absolutely amazing. Without spoiling too much of the book, because there are some absolute jaw droppers in that, I believe. You need to buy the book to read, to find what those are. I'm not going to mention it. But how have you updated your theory from the coupled oscillator from the first book, and also what key players have assisted you in the new research?
Well, the big thing that came into, that I learned about, it actually flowed from my contact with Robert Vorter, who is a sound engineer. And Robert is he's a researcher. He has a degree in archaeology, and and he's got a brilliant mind. But we did a tour in Egypt in 2018, And before that tour, another gentleman came into my life. His name is Eric Wilson.
Yeah.
He's an aerospace engineer, and so Eric, I was actually driving down the street. Bob, he lives in San Jose, and he was visiting me in the Midwest. And we're driving down the street, and a call comes in, and it's Eric, and he's um, at that time they were talking about the new big void in the Great Pyramid, and it was like, what was it for? And I was receiving emails. Well, what do you think this is for? My response was always, there's not enough information for me to actually draw an opinion. I think the resolution is not great. They really need to be able to get inside this space to find out. And so, but Eric called and he said, "Hey, this big void, I know what that is." And I said, "Oh, really? What is it?" He said, "I always thought that your theory was lacking something. I think I told you about this. It didn't have a preamp." Well, that big void would serve as your preamp because it's located right where the northern shaft is, probably surrounds the northern shaft. But okay, how would that work then? And all you have to do would be fill it with quartz sand, silicon quartz crystals, and then connect it in some way to the shaft, and then the signal coming down through the shaft would be amplified. And it's like, well, that's brilliant. I like that. So yeah, I incorporated that in my book. That I thought that was a brilliant observation. And he's had a few. But the other part was we had a geologist on our tour, Adrian Lungen. He was graduated from London University College. But he was a geologist. He worked in China, and he was very interested in the granite, and particularly the percentage of quartz in granite. And I had used a number in the Giza power plant that said that there was 55% silicon quartz crystal in the granite in the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid. And I had proposed that the piezoelectric effect might be a function that would, it would be activated and produce electron flow. And so Adrian, his analysis of the Aswan quarry was that the granite was not 55%, it could be maybe even 20% silicon quartz crystal. And so became a huge issue because piezoelectricity, as I described in the Giza power plant, would have been a part of the process, a necessary part of the process. So that kind of deflated that idea. Plus the fact that piezoelectricity only works when you stress a crystal across a certain axis, and so with them being randomly orientated, then you could not guarantee that you would even have a piezoelectric result. So yeah, that kind of died. Then Robert came back to the States and he started research, and he came across Friedman and Freund's work on earthquake lines.
Right. Perfect timing. Yes.
So
my question was this: the Friedman and Freud theory about earthquake lights is fascinating, and I've discovered that from your last book. And I also watched the TEDx talk in Newchurch, New Zealand. You recommended that. Brilliant. 20 minutes. Anybody wants to watch it, Google it. Friedman and Freud, FREUND TEDx talk. You got to watch it. Now, Christchurch. Apologies. What I want to do now, because there's some listeners that still don't understand the function of the pyramid, and I just want to point out, you never suggested that they're a power station, right? They're a harvester, and I just want to say that energy doesn't die. Energy doesn't get created and it never dies. Energy's everywhere. So what you're suggesting is this is a harvest electron harvester. So let's start from the Earth. What's Friedman and Freud's theory? Where do these electrons come from?
Well, he says that the lithosphere, igneous rock, and that's, under our feet, it's up to 100 kilometers thick. But the igneous rock has the minerals in igneous rock contain these peroxide defects and positive whole charge carriers, right? And so when they are stressed, these positive electrons will shoot to the surface and then combine with the negative electrons, and then they ionize the air.
And they have a natural like desire to go to the highest topography, right?
That's yes. They go to the highest point on the surface of the Earth,
Ah,
and
okay. Not just
that
the pyramid; it just goes
because
straight up.
because he had NASA satellites. He used NASA satellites monitoring the planet and noticing the earthquake lights around Achaia in Italy, where they had that earthquake, and these lights were showing up days ahead of time. And so his motivation was to uh, see if he could develop an early warning system, earlier warning than what we currently have, that would alert us to the possibility of an earthquake happening. And so but I was looking at it, and I was like, Freund is not a big fan of the whole piezoelectric effect, being responsible for all these terrestrial lights, that show up when the Earth moves or the rocks go crunch under the Earth. But essentially, Freund concluded that the lithosphere is a giant battery, or if put under stress, it will turn into a giant battery. And so I was like, we have a battery underneath us. All we need is the right conditions to release the electrons in it.
Fantastic. Yeah.
And so, everything about the Giza power plant, and it's actually driving pulses into the Earth, would fit right into that. And so
let me get this right. You've got two channels of water, which Hakeem also explained to me, or Stephen Meller's book, positive and negative. One comes from the solar, one comes from the lunar. Two channels would come into the subchamber and cause, would they be ionized because they're positive and negatively charged already? No. I don't know.
Yeah, there are differences of opinion on the Queen's chamber, where you have those two shafts. There are differences.
No, I'm talking about the subterranean, the water that's going in.
Are
they charged?
The subterranean chamber was described as a hydraulic pulse generator. The guy who proposed that was John Cadman, and John Cadman had been following Edward Kunkel's research. He was a hydraulic engineer in Ohio and wrote a book called The Pharaoh's Pump. And so he tried to replicate Kunkel's experiment, and he wasn't successful with that. But then he got the idea that the subchamber was in some way functional in shaping or channeling or causing hydraulic pulses that would shake the whole pyramid. And yeah, beginning around 2001, I think, I started to receive emails from John, and he was sending me his work, and then eventually I decided that, well, he's really of all the pyramid theorists, including myself, right, who are talking about what the pyramid might have been for, what the Great Pyramid might have, probably the only one, there may be more, but he was the only one I know who had actually created a working model of his idea on what
Right.
the substance is used for. So
I saw
I
that.
got a
Yeah.
flight out to I got a flight out to Washington, Bellingham, Washington, and went to his place and witnessed his pulse generator, and it was quite a remarkable visit.
And you could feel this vibrating off the floor really strong, right?
Yeah, I mean, he had his waste pipe that was going through under the path, and walking down the path, you could feel it thumping underneath your feet.
Wow.
Right.
So okay, so the electrons are coming up to the ionosphere. That they've charged the whole pyramid, and then the pyramid's job is to harness these electrons, right? And it starts with the subterranean, which pumps up the water into the Queen's chamber, and then
Oh,
you have.
no, I don't have that. I don't have that model in my book.
Sorry, go on.
Uh,
Yeah, go on.
that was yeah another outcome of the 2018 tour was Adrian Langen, the geologist, and another engineer who had joined the tour, went into the subterranean chamber, and Adrian said to me, he said, there's really no sign of there's any significant water flow in that
Yeah, that's right.
No. I would go on that. And then the other part was in order for Cadman's theory to work or apply to the Great Pyramid, there would have to be an exit point from the subchamber leading down to the Sphinx enclosure. And so there's only two possible vents that may serve that function. One was the well shaft in the middle of the floor of the subchamber, and then there is a horizontal passage on the south wall that goes down for quite a ways. I don't know exactly how far, maybe 100 feet. But anyway, Andy Leskowitz, who was the engineer who was with us on the tour, he actually crawled down that passage, and he reported that it's all natural rock and there are no exit points or any sign that if there was an exit point that it had been filled in. So it was basically a blind hole. Now the question is, what was the blind hole for?
Yeah, exactly.
But as far as fluid water flow in that area, in the Great Pyramid, that seems that 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 argument seems to be a little weaker now. However, I mean, and I said in my book that if you're looking at the entire plateau as a system, a complete system itself,
Yeah.
then it's quite possible that you would have a pulse generator deep under the Giza plateau that was shaking the whole plateau. And
Which was like Tesla's earthquake device, right?
yeah, and farming the electrons as they flow through the earth, right?
Yeah, because Tesla always said if you could capture seismic energy before it's transmitted, which is the Freedom and Freud sort of thing, then you're harnessing free energy from the ground, and maybe you
Right,
could release that pressure so there is not an earthquake, which makes a lot of
right, right.
sense. So, okay, in the Queen's chamber, so going from the subterranean into the Queen's chamber, you have the flow of water, but you haven't. There's
No
no evidence
water.
of that yet. No water. Just pressure.
Well,
The
and
hydrogen, is it?
yeah, the it doesn't flow up from the subterranean chamber. I proposed that there were two chemicals that flowed into the Queen's chamber
That's right.
uh, through the north and south shaft, and those chemicals combined, and then you had a reaction that created hydrogen. And so that was the hydrogen was important for the process that was happening in the King's chamber.
And the
But
funny thing is, one of the questions I would ask is where did the chemicals come from? And there is, I won't give too much away, but that shaft thing you wrote in the book was unbelievable. And read it. You have to read the book what I'm talking about. But Ahmed Adley, our mutual friend who was just on my show, he said he was on a tour and there was residue of sand blowing down the Queen's chamber, which must have been coming from the outside. So I was like, where are the chemicals being poured? And they possibly were shafts outside, which were easy to maintain, I guess, which would have pumped these chemicals up and down. And obviously
Yeah.
there's all the salt residue as well. Fascinating stuff that. And
Yeah.
these shafts outside. One of my questions to you is: it would be no way you could blow high pressured air from the Queen's chamber and test where it would exit, and then the sand would blow out outside, for example, or pour water.
Well, I think I proposed that
Yeah.
they pump water into the shaft and see, yeah, you know, I identified a shaft on the east side of the Great Pyramid as uh, being a part of that system, where you would have holding tanks and then the means to pump chemicals to both the north shaft and the south shaft. So, actually proving that out is on requires additional research, which requires permission.
Yes.
The but then the idea that I had was just close off the openings, the shafts, and then pump water in, and then observe that shaft on the outside and see if it starts to get wet at the bottom.
Again, your theory is always test. You got to test these things out and show working models.
Right.
You've always been a big
Yeah, I
believer
mean,
of that.
you've got to understand that it's a reverse engineering project, and it's heuristic, and I have my own ideas, and the Egyptians' ideas, the builders of the pyramids' ideas, have turned up to be entirely different and probably superior to the ideas that I had.
I thought the tank trap theory was brilliant, and how they replaced the electrodes, because I was like, yeah, how the hell would they do that? But genius, man. I just can't believe how you can think about these things. So please, people, buy the book, all three in order. You got to do the whole homework here, but fascinating. So, okay, there's the hydrogen goes up the grand chamber. There's resonators or tuning forks which stimulate the hydrogen, and then that hydrogen goes into the king's chamber through an almost kind of maser. I'm still not quite understand that. I kind of get the theory, but what people want to know is, where does this energy go, and how does it go outside, and what would that be used for? That's one of the big questions from one of my fans, Christian. He's a mechanical engineer in Vietnam. He works on updating Ferraris. Very, very smart guy, So his big question is, yeah, what's the power? How does the power come out? How does it get out of the pyramid into the casing or whatever? And then what happens next?
Yeah, that's a question I'm often asked, and a lot of people will say, well, we don't find any evidence of toaster ovens out in the desert, and so, if we don't find any evidence of electrical devices that would use the energy, what, where would it go? What would it be used for? Uh, so there are two things, two parts to that. There is generally the electrons that will flow through the Earth from the lithosphere into the pyramid,
Yeah.
and they would not only, be kind of squeezed and concentrated around the king's chamber, which there was a paper written by some Russian researchers that indicated that the pyramid would act as some kind of lens to focus electromagnetic energy. But
Wow.
there's also electromagnetic energy that would flow through directly through the Great Pyramid and to the outside. And so, there has been observations in the past that were of electrical activity. I think it was Wilhelm Siemens who fashioned a Leyden jar and when he was climbing the Great Pyramid, and he got charged with electricity that he used to shock his guide. That's just anecdotal? Is it just one of the urban legends of Pyramidius? I don't know. But it's an interesting story, right? But basically, you're talking about a mountain of stone and electrons flowing through from the Earth. So I had proposed that they used like a Tesla dome
Yeah.
around the Great Pyramid, and that it could be used to radiate out, as Tesla had proposed with Wardenclyffe Tower, and then the other part might be that maybe it was a closed dome, and there was some other means of channeling or feeding that energy. The King's Chamber is kind of different, and it's unlike any other chamber that you see in any pyramid, in that you have these 5 layers of granite beams above it. And in the
Yeah.
Giza power plant, I identified them as actually being tuned to a particular frequency, and the entire chamber being independent and detached from the core masonry was free to resonate without any damping, well, with very little damping. And then, it became a vibrating mass of energy. But the objective with it was for hydrogen to fill that space, to be driven to a higher energy level. And then that energy is collected by an input signal of hydrogen microwaves. And then it shoots across it's like a laser. Okay, so it builds in energy as it bumps into other atoms that have energized electrons. Then those electrons return to ground state, emitting a packet of energy. That energy is collected, and then it shoots over to the opposite wall, where there is the southern shaft, and the southern shaft has the shape of a microwave horn antenna, if you look at it. So that's kind of a very interesting feature. The other interesting feature of the northern shaft, and in my book, I describe it a little better than I did in the Giza Power Plant, my new book, and that is the bends, how it goes, circles the Grand Gallery, and it actually misses the Grand Gallery by about 13 feet. So you could imagine, how thick the wall blocks of the Grand Gallery are if they have to bend this northern shaft around that structure and miss it by 13 feet. But then it comes around and it goes through 4 bends before it goes into the King's Chamber. And the interesting thing with that is it enters the King's Chamber at the quarter wave point, which is, in a resonator, if there's a standing wave, the highest amplitude is at the quarter wave point. So that all those features seem to indicate that, yeah, there's something special about this. The other thought that I did not write in my book is that perhaps it was all those turns and bends in that shaft was to actually increase the length of the shaft, or the tube, so to speak. And that was done for harmonic or frequency purposes. So there's a lot of unanswered questions, and I'm just a pointer. And I'm a mechanic who's like pulling on experts' opinions and
So
different.
I just want to add a
Trying
couple
to
of things to that. People ask me what the other 2 pyramids are for, and I just said, just look at your conventional like power stations. Is always like backups, whatever. They've also asked me like, where's all the machine parts? And of course, if you look at Star Wars, you have all these junkyards full of all the spaceship parts. That's probably what would have happened. People would have used the metals for other things, right? So that kind of explains that. But what were the obelisks for then? Do you believe that they were put on specific energy sites? Because that's what Ibrahim goes into in his book, and that you could direct wireless energy or microwave energy from this power station to cities, which were basically what you would call the old menhirs or the dolmens, which is like
Yeah,
you had like a rock, two rocks on top of each other
yeah,
with the electron power coming up. And I think the druids in that they would have gone to those places for healing initially,
right,
which
right,
would have been,
right.
they would have become the inner sanctum of like their churches, like the ziggurat idea. You build upwards. So what you're saying about that hole at the bottom of the pyramid could have been the original, the energy source or the dolmen, if that makes sense. But do you believe that that's what these were for, and that's why we had obelisks? They spent a great deal of time with these obelisks out of specific rock. Was this the source powering, and what was that power being used for?
Yes, the I think the standing stones all around the planet seem to exhibit uh, some kind of acoustic phenomena or something, along those lines, ultrasonic or other. But there are people a lot smarter than me who have studied those things and written books about them. The obelisks themselves in Egypt, I are they just markers or tourist attractions, something that, or are they functional devices? I would argue that they. I wouldn't argue, but I would suggest that they are probably functional, and in that, as we were talking earlier, they're connected to the Earth, and all things are connected to the Earth, are related in some way. But in Egypt, and in the places where they're located, I don't think they were located willy-nilly by accident. And then certainly they they would respond to Earth energies. I mean, they would be like resonators, and then what the effects, what they would produce, what benefits they would produce. I don't know. Uh, it's
I
too early.
think
I think it's too early to say.
Ahmed said that they're still practicing healing in Egypt. There's
Yes.
things, yeah, so I 100% to do with that. What I learned from Hakeem, he told me that how you distinguish a pyramid from a tomb is that a pyramid's called a per netta, and
Mm.
it means house of energy. And there's symbols in these that show that. What Ahmed told me, I learned from him, is that there's a fable or a myth that they would glow from the outside. So I think this is
Yeah.
Egyptian mystique. You're onto it there. Now, one question from another fan was: is there any way? Because you mentioned that the base of the pyramid would have an effect on how much like pressure you could get from the floor, which is a big point. But is there any way to sort of say how much energy you can get out of something like that? I know it might not be your thing, but what are we talking in modern terms? Enough to
Yeah. No,
enough to power a whole country, for example?
uh, boy, that would be something. Yeah, I don't know. I did get an estimate from a guy in the UK who was a professional estimator for power plants, but these were conventional power plants, and he indicated that it would be like 25 gigawatts or something of that nature, which is significant amount of energy. Uh, but what the real number is, I don't know. I, I I couldn't even imagine.
Do you, was there
Obviously,
is there evidence of people living around there? I mean, because people don't live near power stations. Would you think that would have an effect on people, like their hair standing up or radiation? I don't think it's radiation because we've obviously stated it's clean, but you guess
right.
people wouldn't live around there. It would be like a work site, an industrial area, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. If you've got an installation and the ground is thumping constantly, I mean, yeah, I don't think it would be very comfortable to live in, very close to it. But then at the same time, if you have a system and the elements in the system are designed and built with frequencies in mind or music in mind, then you could have a more pleasant environment to live in while drawing energy from the earth. The interesting thing about Freund's work and his lab experiments is that it doesn't take much movement of the rock for these electrons to be released. It's only a couple of angstroms, which is not much at all. So I kind of like to look at it as the ultimate environmentally and harmonically balanced system that is beneficial to the human organism and also beneficial to the earth, in that you're just shaking the earth a little bit, but you're doing it in a way that matches the earth's frequencies. It matches human frequencies of our DNA. And so the outcome is, the earth gives us electrons, but it also, you settle its stresses, like the stresses in the earth that build up to the point of earthquakes. So you relieve them a little bit. You relieve stresses in human beings, and it seems like it's a very positive and beneficial way of drawing energy or harvesting energy, and then as far as what that energy is used for, we have to, I think, go back way before the pre-dynastic civilization, back into maybe around the Ice Age or something like that, before we could find answers to what they were using that energy for. I know it's a huge stretch of the imagination to even consider that, and I didn't. I mean, my opinion had always been that I didn't, from an engineering perspective, didn't really matter to me whether the pyramid was built 20 years ago or 20,000 years ago. I mean, basically, it's just an engineering puzzle to figure out.
Yeah.
But then when you are faced with those questions, it's like, well, there's so much infrastructure that is missing. How do you answer those questions? And then, how do you answer those questions?
Now, just one quick question about before you would build a pyramid with the Friedman Freud theory, would they have been able to see something in the sky that would have shown them that there was a perfect area to build such a structure? Like you mentioned, the lights. Would that have been visible? Yeah.
That's a good question, because I think that if we were to do that today, we would select a site that we know that is very active, maybe drill some test holes and let off a few mini explosions to see what we could get out of the lithosphere. And there are some promising locations around the world that are a little more active than others in terms of light shows and stuff like that.
Well, I'm just interested because you mentioned that that's kind of like the Earth's stressing, let's say. And then just this week, we've had all these lights, even in Vietnam. And then, everybody's got theories, but one theory is that geoengineering, all this kind of thing. Do you think that could be a real sign from Earth saying, yo, I'm under pressure, or I'm being manipulated or something, I'm not happy? It might look beautiful, but it might be a stress call. The song Purple Rain, it's all about looking at the end of the world by Prince. That's what he's on about. So We got purple lights. So what do
Yeah.
you think about all of that?
Well, I think those were more like the aurora borealis, which is not so much Earth movement, but the cosmic rays from the sun, and it's kind of like, yeah. I, one of the I think one of the issues, and humans have always been the same when they are faced with something they don't understand. They tend to think that God is involved in some way,
Yeah.
and it's like Arthur C. Clarke says that sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
Exactly.
Uh,
And now, what new revelation would make you seriously change your mind that the pyramid is not what you think it is?
oh, um, hmm.
What could turn your
Yeah,
theory on
I
its
don't
head?
know. I think I would probably have to recycle into another lifetime to be able to objectively answer that question.
So you really, I mean, even on Joe Rogan, you was like, it's a machine, and I'm with you. I'm with you. Sometimes people comment to me, and I'm thinking, wow, my mind's set up, but of course, I don't want to be biased. But I've followed your work. To me, it resonates. It answers all the questions that I couldn't figure out. I mean, I'm not genius like you, but I'm
I'm
so
not.
no, we're just
I'm.
passionate. The
I'm
pyramid
just a
for
lad.
me,
I'm just a lad from the shop.
the pyramid is the elephant in the room. For me, it's the ancients saying, "Look, if you can figure this out, we'll give you the answers to the world." And that's what we've all been trying to do it by chipping in. So this void, this new void, if anything was discovered, it could affect your theory, or you're not really fussed
Yeah,
about it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously, we need more information about it, but I think it certainly has introduced added a different element to it, and strengthened it in a way. If it turns out to be what Eric uh, thinks it might be, so I think it was a good observation by him, and obviously it's there, and we need more information about it.
Now, based on your experience, do you think there's been a deliberate attempt to sort of hide revelations? Like when people go into these tombs first, they've already been in there, they've already took things out. Because I've heard all the stories about stuff in the museum and people walking in rooms and finding stuff. And there was also
Yeah.
something about a room with a giant crystal in that never really got talked about that much. But do you think that there's a lot more information available, just not allowed to get access to it?
Um. hmm. I don't have any firm opinion on that. I know that I've heard that before, and I've heard different stories about people accessing different parts of the pyramid and finding things, but I haven't seen any real objective good evidence to support that. The and so I remain open-minded, and you know I don't know. Uh,
No, yeah, it's fair enough. That's what I love about you. You don't answer unless you're sure. Um, Now, if the theory of yours is proven, what are the ramifications for the future of humanity?
uh, well, if you go back what 100 years, right? And you go back, to the Industrial Revolution, and how we have been generating energy, electricity, or harvesting electricity. Um, we've been burning coal, boiling water, blowing turbines, and harvesting the electrons off of these generators, feeding it into the national grid. And if in the US alone in 2021, they had they had mined or extracted enough coal to burn to generate electricity, enough coal to build a pyramid 76 times the size of the Great Pyramid. So that makes you sit up and take notice, because we certainly know how to extract rock. And to think that you may be able to replace one of those coal power plants with an electron harvester that's the shape of a pyramid, and it's actually maintenance free for the most part.
Yeah.
The what is the return on investment? I mean, the initial investment would be significant, maybe $25 billion or something like that to build it. But what is the return on investment? Because the continuing running costs will be so low. And then, of course, the benefits to the environment would be fairly significant too.
100% clean energy.
Right.
I know you're getting a bit tired. Just hang in there. I just want to finish these questions.
Oh,
Thank you.
on that.
Thank you so much, Chris. Now, on Joe Rogan, there was an episode with Random Carlson. And if you can't comment on this, it's fair enough. But there's a guy called Malcolm Bendel. Have you heard of him?
Yeah.
So this guy claims that he has some kind of fully functional cold fusion generator. And he said it's not working perfect, apparently, but there are signs of true magic. And apparently, Rogan didn't entertain that on the show for valid reasons. But I listened to Danny Jones' podcast, which loved the episode you did with Danny Jones. Big shout out to him. A guy called George Howard was on there recently, and he goes into the story of Malcolm in depth. So I suggest anybody listening to this, please check out Danny Jones on that. But what he suggests is that Malcolm's story is true, and George Howard claims that he has 2 working models of this groundbreaking tech, which will be on display and functioning to the public at the upcoming Cosmic Summit. Now, this is interesting because we're talking about clean energy again, but can you comment on this in any way? And does it have any connection to your research?
No, I don't see any connection, and I'm not really qualified to comment on it, so I won't.
Okay, fair enough. Are there any persistent critics that I should invite on my podcast in the near future that could offer a solid argument that your theory, may be biased or incorrect? Because I think it's very important to always listen to both sides.
Persistent critics.
I know you're not a fan of debating, so I'd like to have a go and just listen to other people. I think the
No, I
listeners.
mean, you probably know more than I do. Uh, so, I mean, yeah,
I just think you're a
yeah.
charmer.
I think if you have a Rolodex that's full of critics' names, I'll just leave that to you, who you
Okay.
select to interview.
Good answer. Now, one more thing. You did mention Hakeem in your book. Did you actually ever meet him before he passed away?
Oh yeah, I spent a lot of time with Hakeem.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we had a great time.
As I said, it was his books. It was his wisdom and Stephen Meller's teachings that put all the pieces together. So can you just give us how different was his tour of Egypt? What did you learn different from any other wisdom keeper?
Uh,
Because some critics call him a fraud, which I don't believe that.
well,
I think
I'm not when it comes to the chematology and that kind of native wisdom and philosophy, or whether it's the oral tradition or whatever, I respect that. I'm not a very good student of it, and I can't say that it has had a huge impact on how my work has developed. But I do find, I found Hakeem to be extremely warm, welcoming, and entertaining. So, and enjoyed his company immensely. And his family. I mean, he has, the Yusuf, Awiyan, the Shahzad, Badawi Awiyan, who is a wonderful guy. So the family is, I think, have always been very, very kind and supportive of me. But my research has been along a different line. I'm in a different lane, and I
Well,
try to keep my lane.
the reason that he got me started and why I love him so dearly. Yesterday was Mother's Day. I went to Egypt in the month of May, and I shouldn't have gone there because the war was on, and the tour operator told me not to go. I actually have a picture of me and my niece at the pyramid. We're the only ones there, Chris. He was dead.
Yeah.
And when I went to Hakim's house, I'd already lost my dad 3 years ago, and then my mum had sarcophagus cancer. She was dying. She told me to go to Egypt, and
Oh boy.
I was worried that I wasn't going to see her. She said, "You better go. Don't worry about me." So when I was at Hakim's house, the first thing he said to me was, "Oh, your dad's here," and I was like, "What?" And then he said, "Your mum's sick." I didn't say anything. He knew. And he said, "I'm going to send your mum some energy from the Sphinx, and she will know." And that's when I didn't really know what the teaching was, but that was the first week of the trip. And then I came back a week later. I got home on Friday, and my sister said, "Mum's sick. She's in hospital." So I raced to the hospital, and the nurse said she'd been waiting for me. And I chatted with her, and she was awake, but she was very heavily drugged up on morphine. And then the next morning, I rushed to the hospital again. I got all the clothes, and I stayed there till Tuesday. I got all the family there on the Monday, and Hakeem said, "I'll send her some energy, and she will know." And this is where the magic comes in for me, because she sat up in the hospital bed in front of everybody like the exorcist and stared me in the face, and then went back down, and she died the day after. And I told the nurse, I buzzed her, I said, "Mum's just sat up." She said, "Impossible. She's had too much morphine." And I just feel like Hakeem just gave me enough energy to get home, be there, get all the family. We had people come up from Cambridge. That's what he meant to me. And I lost
Yeah.
contact with him. And then I saw him on the Pyramid Code accidentally on Discovery Channel. And I saw Robert Baval in the same series. Apparently, they'd never met. But I was like, "Oh, he's real. That's the guy with his little hat." So I'm hoping to get his son, Yusuf. I really want to speak to him just to say thank you. And that's what got me started on this whole thing, really. So thank you to Hakeem.
God
Now,
bless.
how important is it to have a sense of humor in all of this? Because you love cracking jokes.
Oh yeah, pretty lame, aren't I? I think, well, for me, humor is very important. It's I can't stand people who don't have a sense of humor or
Yeah,
take themselves too seriously.
yeah.
It's kind of like, no, I I love people with a sense of humor, and that's just it.
It keeps you vibrant and youthful as well, right? Okay, just not too many questions left. You've been amazing. Thank you so much so far. But you have an immense ability to put giant pieces of puzzles together in the most logical sense. And you communicate that well to your readers without being too complicated, as I mentioned. But do you feel that the deeper you dig into this stuff, you often have to suspend the academic logic and look towards a more spiritual reasoning to find even sharper conclusions?
Um, I I can only say in answer to that question was that for me, spiritual reasoning was always on the table.
Yeah,
I never reached a point where I would say it's time to recognize the workings of spirit or nature, and so that's always been central for me
yeah,
in guidance. But ultimately, uh, in my work product, I try to maintain a Cartesian perspective in terms of you know following the scientific method, describing things accurately and logically, and and in ways that people understand. Because you can be inspired with all kinds of inductive kind of reasoning, but eventually, if you are communicating to somebody who is not sharing that space with you at the time when you become inspired, or they don't understand, you have to be able to render it in to be understandable in the three-dimensional world. That's basically it.
When people talk about advanced civilization, I just visualize a time when everybody was harmonized, they were working together, they were using their brain power, and that's what we're lacking at the moment. Everybody's so disjointed, different ideas, different beliefs. Now, when I see the body of Akhenaten with his elongated head, I personally believe that looks like a different species, maybe higher intelligence. What's your thoughts on that? These elongated skulls?
Yes, I mean they exist in other places. I mean Peru is one place where they have elongated skulls. That is not my bailiwick. I don't really get into discussing that because while I find the subject interesting, and I would study the geometry of an elongated skull, but as far as as far as its origins and what it truly represents, I think we have to go back in time to find answers to those questions.
But would you be discovered if we found out that there was some kind of non-human species? I mean, we know about the UAP stuff and that technology now, which is mind-blowing. But would you be surprised if there was some kind of non-human species that's always controlled the world, always controlled the tech and the narratives?
I don't subscribe to the idea that we are being controlled by exterior forces.
Right.
I think that seems to, I mean, there's a lot of people that do. But as far as whether there are alien cultures that exist off planet, I wouldn't be surprised at all. I would love to be able to follow one of those UAPs home,
Yeah.
and go to the factory where it was built to find out how they were building them, because they certainly operate at a higher level than what we are capable of operating at.
Now, nearly there. I just listened to a podcast yesterday, and you mentioned this, like the Tesla and the pyramid connection. Like, did Tesla replicate the pyramids design? And there's no real evidence of that. There's just a couple of videos on YouTube, which, influenced me at some point. But it's an old movie, 1980, which is the original Tesla film, which is Orson Welles. And in that movie, at the end, JP Morgan is Orson Welles, and he has all these designs, pictures of Tesla's vehicles and patents. Now, JP Morgan definitely went to the pyramid, and I'm sure he had some like experience with resonation and stuff, right? And then obviously he invested in Tesla. So I think there's a connection there where information, I'm not sure there's an evidence of Tesla ever going to Egypt. He must have done, in my opinion, but I think that the connection is through JP Morgan, the technology, asking Tesla to do these patents. And on the pictures in the movie, you see, for example, a plane in the sky, and there's a source of energy coming from a tower that's illuminating the plane. And it's funny because you mentioned at the end of the Joe Rogan podcast, give this book to Elon because he's going to need electric to power his cars. See, the funny thing is, I've always said to my friends, these giant towers in every city now, once they build those towers, it becomes like a smart city. And I wouldn't be surprised. I wanted to ask your opinion on that. Are these the new pyramids? these giant towers because they're high up. I'm just, maybe they're harvesting energy from the ground and bouncing like the old obelisk technology. And that's what's actually powering the cities on separate grids. And just one more thing, if you Google Peerless Motors, it's an old motor car company from the 1900s based
Oh,
in
right.
America.
Yeah.
Now
Right.
check out Peerless Motors and Google vintage posters, and you'll see a lot of posters where it's got some kind of tower illuminating a beam of light down onto the car. There's loads of them.
Right.
And I find that interesting being 100 years ago. So that's what I think Tesla had invented. And that technology is now in the hands of people who use a separate power grid, whereas we're still paying for the utility, which was designed by Edison. Do you think that's a possibility? Because people ask me, why don't we build the pyramids anymore? They might be the modern version.
Yeah. Well, I think those towers, they are connected to the power grid, right? They're drawing power from the national grid. Um,
Possibly.
but I mean, as far as yeah, I mean, the whole idea is like the wireless delivery of energy, and just imagine having a Tesla vehicle in the future that has no battery, but it has it's plugged into the wireless system and receiving energy that way. But then too, uh, also able to master the gravity and uh, be able to float above the ground instead of being sucked down onto rubber tires. The
Well, I've
there's a
got
lot that can happen in the next 100 years when it's just like you have to believe what may be possible. And
I've just got this theory that the old energy spots have moved. Like whatever destroyed the pyramid, whatever caused that domino effect, could have could have changed the ley lines or whatever. So now we built cities and we're building these circular structures like Apple Park on the new sites. And that's somehow harvesting energy through these towers. So, in my opinion, it's very possible that this whole power system's still working, but it's just not for everybody. We don't know. And slowly this technology trickles out. And that would explain to me this UAP activity. Because when you look at a Tesla car accelerate, to me, it looks like a magnet so fast. So if there is some kind of power grid, I mean, they used to say ley lines, they would build a road and the troops in Rome would march down that road and they'd be energized through the bricks. So imagine
right,
what a railroad could do. If you put a railroad on an energy line, and they're talking about building a railroad on the moon now, before they've even thought about putting people on there, right? But I would say what you've suggested is the ancient tech, and I think we're looking for it, but it's there. It's right in front of our face. And Elon Musk is fully aware of that and he's using it. Now, just one more thing. For those that are interested in this topic, is there any books that you would recommend that would seriously blow your mind? Just a few, because everybody's always hungry for knowledge.
yeah. I mean, the obviously Tompkins' book is required reading. I think
It's called
uh,
The Secrets of the Pyramids.
Secrets of the Great Pyramid. Yeah,
Yeah.
uh, yeah. I mean, there's just go to Amazon. You'll find all kinds of books. The book that you mentioned by
Ibrahim
uh,
Karim. Yeah.
Kareem. Yeah. Um, there's quite a few of them. Um,
Um, Ahmed, who was a wonderful guest, speaks very highly of you, loves you very much. Also, one of the people that took over from your research in Egypt. He's helping with the Egyptian motivation.
right.
He's mentioned that there's a possible future project to re-engineer, back engineer the pyramid and create some kind of working model. Have you heard about that? And are you involved?
Um, I think the objective. I mean, I was asked the question in 2021 by two Egyptian officials if the Great Pyramid could be restored and made functional again.
Yeah.
And I'd never considered that question in the past, or I had not even thought deeply about it because I thought that it really couldn't happen because of politics and one thing and another. But I really started to consider the question, and the most uh, the most salient uh, positive support to be able to do that is the amount of limestone that you wouldn't have to quarry. It's already there, right? But the other part is that, and I wrote a chapter about this in my book, you know, reverse engineering and going and rebuilding the Great Pyramid. You would have to take it apart and repair the broken parts and learn more about uh, features on the inside, like the big void. Uh, you'd have to learn more about that. So there's yeah, I mean, I think the objective is to learn as much about the Great Pyramid as possible. And but I think before, you know, you start going in there and tearing things apart, there would need to be some very serious high level study done of the function of the Great Pyramid, uh, uh, using, you know, finite element analysis and using all the brains that we have in terms of acoustic, engineering, physics, uh, you name it, you know, all of these specialized skills and knowledge. In fact, I think I said on Rogan that it would be good if a you know a PhD student for his dissertation would do an acoustic modeling of the inside of the Great Pyramid. Right, that would provide us with a lot uh, of good information and answers. So, yeah, it's I think once you're assured by computer modeling that you are, if you invest money in actually creating physical objects and putting them together to work, if you're pretty much assured that they will function as designed, then I think that's probably the natural path and the most logical path to take before you
Okay.
even cut a rock, you know?
So just just before we finish this scan project thing, what we're expecting to get from that? I mean, they're still looking for treasure, or are they actually trying to figure out the function of the pyramids, and who's paying for that?
Yeah. Well, I'm not. And I think they have stakeholders. I mean, the stakeholders for Scam Pyramid, they're pretty they're heavy hitters. You're talking about high energy research labs in Japan. You're talking about these energy companies in France, universities and things like that.
So it's
Who
they are looking into the fact that it could be a energy device, not treasure.
no, I mean they're officially what they're looking for is a King Tut's a
Yeah.
King Khufu's burial tomb, right? But they're finding out a lot of other stuff in the process, so that's valuable.
The
Uh,
greatest builder of all time. You know,
yeah,
you think that would be in a
yeah,
museum for all to see, you know.
yeah.
Fantastic. What a conversation. Now, just quickly, is there any conferences that you would recommend to fans of this topic? Any that you're a talker at? I don't get much chance because I'm in Vietnam, but I'd love to join. But what are the big conferences to get involved with now?
You know, I've backed out of doing conferences, but I think the principal ones now are there's CPAC,
Yeah, CPAC.
which I attended last year. I was a speaker at last year. There's the ARE conference at Virginia Beach. That's the Edgar Casey Foundation.
Oh, yeah.
And and then you were talked earlier about Cosmic Summit. There is that, and there is a another out another organization that is entering this space, and Billy Carson. I don't know if you've heard
Yeah,
of
the
him.
Anunnaki thing. I would love to
Yeah,
get Billy on. I actually,
yeah,
I loved his speech on Danny Jones when he mentioned about Amun Ra. I'd never heard that story before.
Very compelling, very
Yeah,
compelling
I'm actually
personality. Yeah.
reading the Emeralds of Thoth now, but it's one of them books. It's like the Bible. There's so many layers to it, you know.
Yeah.
Have you considered doing any other books in the future, or is that it? Because I would love to see another one if you've still got the energy, but I think you're retired now, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I I'm thinking of just switching gears and focusing on other issues rather than the ancient mysteries and
Right.
stuff like.
Well, Chris, you've done everybody a massive favor. You're a pioneer in this world. You're much loved. I wanted to dedicate this show to your late brother Bernard Dunn, who you'll be
Thanks.
attending. You'll be attending the funeral. So this month. So I'm sorry to hear that, but I just want to thank all your family for raising such a wonderful mind.
Oh,
I've got a son here. Everything that comes through me now has come through you, and I'm sure the viewers the listeners have just been blown away. I can't thank you enough. I hope we can keep in touch. Final question is, will Manchester City win the league this year?
I think they already have, haven't they?
No, 2 more games. Listen, go and have your nap. I'll take you up on that beer when I see you. All right.
All right.
You're always welcome to come to Vietnam. I would love to show you around if you ever get a chance. And yes, good night, everybody. This is the wonderful Chris Dunn. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody. Thanks for listening. Bye.